They are never going to stop doing this to us, are they? Hi, my name is Sydney, welcome back to hell. And as per usual, before we launch in, today's video is sponsored by Lumen. And of course by me and my company, Lions Tea Exchange. I am currently running an almost site-wide sale of up to 40% off to say a big thank you for 1 million subscribers on this channel. While I am working on releasing several new spring/summer flavors, grab yourselves a box or two of my signature blends in the interim, all of which are discounted until stocks last, or whatever the fancy people in commercials say. I will link everything for you all in the description box, and once again, thank you for 1 million subscribers. It's really cool and really exciting. You know, every time I feel like we're moving away from doing stupid things, something happens that reminds me that we are in fact living in 2025. And we're on this stupidity roller coaster. So I think that at this point, it's probably been established that entertainment kind of peaked in the 2010s. This is obviously just my opinion, but it seriously feels like it's been a very long time since any Hollywood studio has produced anything worthwhile. Yes, there are obviously a handful of exceptions, don't yell at me. And honestly, I can't think of what those exceptions are. As I've said before in other videos, it really does feel like we are living through a time where studios and executives and creatives and so on are trying to squeeze every last drop out of existing IPs, whether that's through adaptations or remakes or live action movies or new stories and other things that people haven't asked for and didn't want. And a lot of the time they're doing this with well-liked classics like Lord of the Rings or Disney's entire animated catalog. I honestly have no idea when enough is gonna be enough, particularly for like Disney. I bet you anything they're going to give us The Lion King 1.5. That's not a joke, there really is an animated Lion King 1.5. So with this in mind, it probably won't come as much of a surprise to learn that, not too long ago, HBO announced its intention to create a Harry Potter series. Although this is once again another way of squeezing more juice out of that which already exists, it's not the worst idea given how popular Harry Potter was and continues to be. And this idea would have probably honestly been perfectly okay had the people over at HBO decided to actually do right by the fans and the story itself. But it's 2025, and we can't have nice things. The company allegedly tapped actor, and I'm sorry that I'm gonna say this wrong even though I've listened to the pronunciation like 20 times, Papa Esiadu for the role and is currently in contract talks. I'm not gonna lie, I know that I have talked a lot recently about race swapping and incorrect casting choices. Like the race swapping of Astrid in the live action How to Train Your Dragon, or the overall terrible casting choice of Rachel Zegler in the upcoming Snow White remake. But this one, I think, puts them all to shame. For me, it's almost up there with race swapping the real-life Anne Boleyn, who is played by Jodie Turner-Smith in this horrible abomination. I know I bring this one up a lot, but I will honestly never get over it. I unironically would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when this casting decision was made. Anne Boleyn really existed, and she was in fact a white English woman. I think the best course of action is that we cast a black woman instead. Oh yes! I will make note, and I think this is important, that it is unclear how far into the negotiation process HBO is with this guy, so we don't know as yet whether or not he is or isn't 100% Snape. But either way, if this information turns out to be true, fair, and accurate, which I kind of feel like it's going to be, it is very disappointing to see that this series is already heading down this path, because usually these type of decisions are pretty indicative of what's to come. More disappointment, typically. For those of you who are new here. Right out of the gate, basically every article I read on the matter regurgitated the same talking points. They almost all made reference to the fact that this HBO series was set to be a faithful adaptation of the books. Snape is supposed to be in his early 30s, which is apparently why casting Esiadu is a good choice given he is of similar age in real life. This Collider article, for example, says, the series, which will run for a full decade according to reports, is set to be a faithful adaptation of the novels, and will see a key change in the depiction of the characters, as Harry Potter showrunner Francesca Gardiner has already confirmed that the series will follow the canonical ages of key characters, including Snape, who will be just 31, making Essiedu's casting an especially fitting choice. I feel like I'm missing something here. So the primary thing here that makes this a good casting choice is that this guy is a similar age to Snape in the books?
We do not fully understand what causes Alzheimer's disease.
The good news is, guys, I can actually tell you what is a very fitting choice, and it's hearing from today's sponsor, Lumen. It's not always easy to know what to do to feel your best. Maybe you want to lose weight. Understand why you don't get quality sleep, or just improve your energy levels. But what if I told you there's an easier way to improve these things and understand what's going on inside your body? Well, there is an easier way, and it's thanks to Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. It's also insanely easy to use. First, you breathe into your Lumen when you wake up, and your app will tell you if you're burning mostly fat or carbs. Then, it'll give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your reading. But you don't only have to use your Lumen in the morning. You can use it before or after workouts, before or after meals, so you know what your body is doing in real time. Because understanding your metabolism has so many tangible benefits like better energy levels, better sleep, and better fitness. So if you too want to understand what's going on internally a little better, then click the link in the description, scan the QR code on screen, or go to lumen.me/Sydney20 for 20% off when you get your Lumen. Once again, that's lumen.me/Sydney20 for 20% off your purchase. The insistence that this new HBO show will be a faithful adaptation of the books has actually been parroted since day one, and it's something that has shown up with other shows HBO has decided to take a run at, like The Last of Us, for example. You guys probably don't want to know my opinions about that one. Let me assure you. I'm just one big hater at this point. While it's all well and good to have characters be their actual ages as described in the books, in fact it probably should be that way, I'm not so sure how this article's author arrived at the conclusion that that makes Essiedu a fitting choice for the role. Are there not lots of 30-something ethnically English people who could have been selected for this? Just like, was there no white-skinned woman who could have played Anne Boleyn? Given how many blue bloods are just wandering around the UK, I'm almost positive they could have cast one of her actual bloody ancestors for extra historical accuracy. If you guys also want to have a laugh, I happened upon this particular article in Vulture headlined, "Is Papa Essiedu too hot to play Severus Snape?" And honestly, when I first found this, I was like, wow, this is a really, really dumb article, because it basically made the assertion that Alan Rickman was questionably hot, but Essiedu will be, you know, the first super hot Snape. The more that I thought about this, the more that I realized that outside of the race swap, this is actually a decent point. I hate when I have to give these people props. Just makes me feel a little Snape, by all accounts, is supposed to be unattractive. In order to make this man fit this role, it seems like HBO would have to force him to wear makeup and prosthetics, which is bizarre, I guess, given they could have just found somebody appropriate for the role from the outset. Anyway, since this news broke, the feedback has gone probably the way that most of you have expected. There's been a lot of criticism, a lot of blowback, a lot of people suggesting that this isn't the right choice by any stretch of the imagination, but I've also seen on the other side of the aisle lots of people arguing that Snape isn't actually white in the first place, and therefore this entire issue is a wash. posh. But that isn't necessarily the case. In her books, J.K. Rowling repeatedly describes Severus Snape as a teacher with greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and sallow skin. Sallow, for those of you who are not familiar, describes someone who looks a little unhealthy. Maybe even a little bit yellow, a little bit sickly. Throughout the entire series, Snape is actually referred to as Sallow quite a lot, but your girl over here actually owns all of the Harry Potter books, and I went to look in and I found some other descriptive words, so I'm gonna refer you to some additional passages with other descriptive language. In the Order of the Phoenix, in chapter 24, Rowling writes, Snape looked paler than usual. She also refers to his pallid complexion. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, she refers to his skin as turning the color of sour milk, which is also white. These are obviously just a couple examples, and there are many more, but they usually refer to him as lacking color, being pale, and so on. But even beyond the actual wording itself, J.K. Rowling herself drew concept art of some Harry Potter characters, Snape being one of them. This particular illustration on screen was published in 2008 in the American 10th anniversary edition of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But it's just one of several drawings that Rowling created depicting our Snapey boy. So you see, the argument that Snape is something other than a pale, dark-haired, greasy man is sort of nuts, and so far from being correct that it actually makes me a little mad. One of the other interesting points that I've seen floating around online is the idea that race-swapping Snape changes the entire conflict between him and James Potter. People have pointed out that this will set up a weird situation where James Potter is essentially bullying a young black boy in the 70s, which produces terrible optics and very much changes the storyline between James, Lily, and Snape. Or maybe that's actually the intention. Who's to say? Get a little bit of racism in there. Oh my god, they're gonna put a bunch of forced racism into this, aren't they? Poor little baby Snape. Ugly and bullied. So these observations and points aside, most of you who've been here for a while probably know already how I feel about this topic, because I am nothing if not consistent. In my view, there are very few situations where a race swap actually makes sense. And this definitely isn't one of them. As I have said many times before, when adapting something from existing material, it's very important to stay true to that material. Because again, a lot of the time when people try to go off script and add things, it typically doesn't work out. It usually doesn't make sense within the context of the story and so on. But particularly when it comes to characters, I think that it's worth saying that audiences and viewers come to expect someone to look a particular way, and when you take leave of that appearance, it's confusing and jarring. Situations like these usually result in a handful of progressives feeling happy with the very shallow attempt at diversity, given that this has long been a criticism of Harry Potter. But more than anything, this feels like yet another weird attempt to force corporate diversity and representation down everyone's throats in order to appease the liberal fans who are still angry that J.K. Rowling goes against the grain on transgender issues. For those of you who are not familiar, and at this point I don't know how you can be familiar, J.K. Rowling for years has been standing up for women's rights and aggressively criticizing the current state of the transgender movement. Her position on the issue has led to plenty of upset among progressives who have tried to attack her at every turn. Some of you might remember in 2023 when they screamed and cried over the release of the video game Hogwarts Legacy. Many demanded that the game be boycotted, which seemingly didn't work as it ended up being a massive hit. One of my favorite things is when libs freak out about something and end up making that thing extremely successful because absolutely nobody else cares about microaggressions or the lack of demi-boy representation or whatever crap they're going on with that week. They basically just Streisand effect things into success. Anyway, the bottom line is that if this casting situation is predicated on trying to placate this particular group of people, these progressives, I honestly don't think it's going to get the series particularly far, given that these people have completely switched off to Harry Potter because they are so against everything that J.K. Rowling apparently stands for. Beyond that, it's worth noting that this is not actually the first time that an attempt has been made to make the Harry Potter universe more inclusive and racially diverse. Back in late 2015, it was announced that actress Noma Dumezweni would play Hermione in the stage production of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. This decision was too met with backlash, but interestingly, J.K. Rowling responded to this by calling those critical a bunch of racists. Yes, you heard me correctly. In a 2016 article, she was quoted as saying, "I had a bunch of racists telling me that Hermione turned white. That is, lost color in her face after a shock, that she must be a white woman, which I have a great deal of difficulty with. But I decided not to get too agitated about it and simply state quite firmly that Hermione can be a black woman with my absolute blessing and enthusiasm." Rowling has pointed out that there is no reason why Hermione should be considered white. The books don't explicitly mention her skin color, except for one line that she just referenced where people point to this a lot as well, describing her as white-faced from terror. I'm sorry, but this is honestly such a cope. And I even hate using that word, and yet I'm using it because it's the only one that applies here. There's this one part in The Order of the Phoenix where Ron is telling Hermione that she looks brown from being in the sun because she went on holiday to France. And I can't help but think that if she was already brown, that he wouldn't be telling her that she's brown from getting a tan. Does that make sense? Am I making sense here? Those of you who are not pasty skinned may have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but my assessment has always been, even when dark-skinned people get a tan and go darker, no one's like, oh, you're getting brown. Like, I don't, has everyone ever said that to you? Have they ever been like, hey, you look extra brown? Like, anyway, not to mention, when J.K. Rowling has written black and brown characters, she describes them as such. So I don't know what to tell you guys, but I don't buy this, and all of this reminds me of how J.K. Rowling went through this phase where she was just editing her characters retroactively, like how she decided that Dumbledore was in fact gay and then made that a plot line in the follow-up movies to her other movies. Honestly, all of this reminds me of this particular video.
Ron was actually black.
You said he had red hair.
Harry Potter had Down syndrome.
What? What does that even mean?
Professor Snape was a single mother.
Alright, stop. Why are you doing this?
Doing what?
Listen, it would be fine if the characters were like this originally, but it seems like you're changing them after the fact so you could seem more inclusive and get good press.
Anyway, I'm noting this because when I initially heard that Snape would be black, I wondered if this was a way of sticking it to J.K. Rowling over her comments in support of women and her ongoing fight with the trans movement. But honestly, after sort of looking into this, I'm mostly and completely really of the belief that this is her own way of clawing her way back into the good graces of the radical leftists that she has made so angry. And she probably has no real issue with Snape being race-swapped at all. It might even have been her idea. I mean, if this could happen to Hermione of all people, why would Snape really be any different? I just want to remind you all that nobody has messed with Harry Potter canon more than J.K. Rowling herself, which again, it's perfectly fine to argue that she's more than welcome to do that, given that she is in fact the creator of the books, but as in this Gus Johnson video that I just showed you, it seems like she only ever really does it to win brownie points with the progressives and liberals. So, you know, do with that information what you will. So with this in mind, this probably leads some people to say, if the creator doesn't mind these changes, why would anybody else? And honestly, there's probably some truth to that. But for little old me, my position is unchanging, and like I said before, it is nothing if not consistent. I hate it here. Harry Potter has been around for almost 3 decades. It has spawned so many pieces of entertainment. Movies, video games, theme parks. It has a dedicated fan base of people who have gotten to know the appearances of the characters pretty intimately. And while the Harry Potter films weren't 100% when it came to the physical descriptions of the characters, they did get pretty close. J.K. Rowling can cope as much as she wants around the description of Hermione, but Snape's descriptions and even her own drawings are pretty clear. This is the appearance that we have come to know and expect. It's why so many people suggested immediately that actor Adam Driver be cast in this role instead, given how much it suits him. Beyond that, if Hollywood and the like were intent on having a dark-skinned wizard as part of a wizard-based magical series, they had 3 decades to come up with their own. But they didn't. Instead, they waited until they had the opportunity to swap out that which already exists, and not because it's going to bring more people into the fold or because it actually makes sense. The only reason this seemingly happens is so that studios can say that they're doing a little bit of diversity. And HBO is bad for this, as we learned with the race swapping of Sarah in the Last of Us show in 2024. These choices inevitably make fans angry, not because an actor or actress isn't white, but because they don't look like the character audiences are expecting. And it also usually changes the dynamic of the overall story. Mark my words, it would not surprise me at all if we have a racism element in the new Harry Potter series. This casting is not accurate, and more than anything, it just doesn't feel like a win. And it will become a focal point going forward, probably for the actual storyline itself, and of course for the criticism of the series in general. The bottom line here is that plenty of progressives have completely given up on Harry Potter in general because of J.K. Rowling's position on the trans movement, and those people are unlikely to change their minds anytime soon. All of this, all it actually does is alienate the existing base. My prediction is that there will be even more bizarre casting choices coming down the pipeline here, and honestly, it really wouldn't surprise me if we ended up with a Black Hermione based on everything I've told you in this video. Ultimately, and in the end, I'm not so sure how this is going to affect the overall performance of the series with viewers. But I, for one, am very interested to see what is going to happen going forward, and what additional choices we can expect on the horizon. Now on that note, and before I open the floor to all of you, this is just a reminder to check out Lumen using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. I unironically love my Lumen. I actually use it, and if your metabolism and losing weight, getting sleep, stress management, etc. is something you're worried about, I definitely recommend having a look at Lumen in the very least and seeing if maybe it's something that would work for you. Now I open the floor to all of you. What do you all think? Are you like me and you're looking at this and you're going, this is madness? I have no idea why this is the casting choice being made. Do you think, hey, it's really not that big of a deal? We are once again talking about wizards and characters that don't really exist. This is such a silly thing to worry about. Do you think that it's indicative of where the series is heading? Do you think that it's going to try to tackle racism? Do you think that it will in fact stay true to the original books and work for everybody and be a true and realistic adaptation of the novel? And what you generally make of this issue overall. As always, if you have made it this far in the video, congratulations. I always like having you along for the full ride. If you are new here and you are not subscribed already and you would like to see more of me and more of this kind of content, feel free to subscribe to the channel, as well as leaving this video a like and a comment, because I do read the majority of them and I do like reading your feedback. Of course, in the interim, I encourage all of you to stay very safe and very well and make good choices, and I will see you wonderful, pretty people in the next video.